Matura's Mandala. Okay, we're back to the next section, the next chapter, because the story is really developing into another chapter now with the development of Rishikesh's journey into the world of gems. And it's quite amazing the various chapters of Rishikesh's story. You know, the misunderstood, the obscure ashram, a bit of a freaky scene in Nepal, and then this whole then this kind of new identity that you've got, the new passport from Bombay, and this journey thing that you're going through, where because of your training in Sanskrit, you have this advantage that most Westerners don't have, and the spiritual insight, and you've looked into these ancient texts about gemmology. So this is kind of a lot of this. This next chapter is going to be this story about how you went from these raw rubies from Hyderabad and how you sold them, how you entered into understanding what are gems. And so this is a fascinating for many people, including myself. This is a very new world about what are these things, because basically you've been for years now in Thailand, and you have become one of the premier authorities on gemmology. And so that's a great transition. And so we've
Planetary
yeah,
gemmology.
planetary
Yeah.
gemmology. So that's an important.
I've actually pointed out that there's two kinds of gemmology, just like there's two kinds of physiology. There's mundane gemmology, which just deals with the physical structure of the gem. Then there's planetary gemmology, which deals with the life of the gem. Just like with physiology, if you just examine the body, you're not going to figure out what the soul is. You're not going to understand where the life comes from. Like I remember one time I was at the beach in Jomtien Beach in Thailand, and I was walking down there, and I saw a couple of 2 or 3 Aussie tourists, and there was a jellyfish washed up on the beach, a jellyfish. And they were poking it with sticks. And as I walked by, one guy said, "I wonder what makes this tick." And I thought, man, you can dissect that thing down to the last molecule, and you're not going to answer that question.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's the same thing with gems. What is they give 4 C's of gems: the clarity, the color, the cutting, and the carat weight. But I add 2 more, which is the choice, it was how you choose a stone, which is suitable for you or not, and then the cost. Because sometimes people come and say, "I want the best ruby you can get." And I'm like, "What's your budget?" And I don't know, what should it cost? They think if they tell me their budget, then that's what they're going to have to pay. As if there's one ruby in the whole world, and whatever they say their budget is, that's going to be the price of the ruby, So I don't. It doesn't matter. So if I get like a $30,000 ruby, just recently I sold one, and to an educated buyer, and I say, okay, this is $30,000. Oh my God, I can't even afford $1,000. Well, that's why I was asking your budget, because I don't want to show you a $30,000 ruby if your budget is $1,000. There are rubies that'll cost $1,000, but they're much smaller, and just lesser quality. So it becomes a question of how much money a person has got, because the people who in the scriptures that describe astrological jewelry, they say that the flawless gems, the really high quality gems, are auspicious, and really heavily flawed gems have the opposite effect. So if a flawed gem is unlucky, why should it have any value? Why would anybody want to wear an unlucky stone? Better to have no stone at all. And so I was in India and I was seeing people in Nepal and India, and seeing people wearing navratnas and Indian people. And I mean, they were wearing the junkiest stones imaginable. I mean, I could literally sometimes say to these people, you must have searched the entire universe to find that bad of a stone. Because, if you got Navaratna and you've only got 9 little stones, every one of them has no excuse for not being good, And yet people in India, it's like they have to search for that. It's like, it's hard to find that bad of a stone. You see a ruby, it looks like it's a brick,
Okay.
You see a pearl, it looks like, so I was always like, why do you people not follow your own scriptures? Where it clearly says that junk stones like that are inauspicious. Why would you want to have an inauspicious stone? And then again, if you're going to deal with stones that are auspicious quality, how do you know which one is good for you? That's the choice factor. So you've got cost, choice, color, clarity, cut, and carat weight. The 6 C's, I call it. So anyway, I started realizing that this is, because I went to jewelry stores and stuff. Everybody's got this little lucky birthstones from the West, which is a complete nonsense. If you were born January, February, March, this is your stone, that's your stone. And if you ask any jewelry store, you're handing out this card with your logo on it. What is the meaning of this? They don't have a clue. They don't see lucky birthstone, Or maybe it'll say, your birth sign is Aries or Taurus or Gemini, whatever they're going to say. And then there's some stone. Well, where did this come from? So, later on when I went to GIA, they have one of the courses you take.
Sorry?
The Gemmological Institute of America. When I went back to America years later, I went to the Gemmological Institute to get my Gemmology degree. And one of the courses is a chapter on birthstones. And it describes how the Jewish people, I mean, just imagine, you wouldn't even imagine that jewelry could have anything to do with that, or jewels. So anyway, they had the breastplate of the high priest of Israel, which represents the 12 tribes of Israel. And each one of those is represented by a stone. And it's just stones from the local area, like an agate or a tiger's eye. And there's 12 stones on the breastplate of the high priest, which represents the 12 tribes of Israel. So these people said, okay, we can just start these 12 in order, January, February, March, April. And then we just say, okay, January is this stone. Let's change those stones too, because that's not commercial enough. And they just created this nonsense list. That's not based on astrology. It's not based on tradition. It's just manufactured hogwash. And it's right there in the colored stone chapter on birthstones in the GIA textbooks. It's not even a secret.
Your story of ending up there is a little bit in the future in terms of the chronology of your story. We're going to get back. We're going to get.
Okay,
yeah,
so this is all stuff I learned about later. So when I was, I hadn't really learned how much. But if I would go to a jewelry store in Thailand or something or anywhere, and I would see it, they all have those little lucky birthstones cards. So I said, this is where it's at now. On the one hand, the Western system of birthstones is in every jewelry store they have this, and it's complete hogwash. It doesn't have any relevance to anything. And on the other hand, if I say planetary gemmology to an Indian, they actually think, oh, you must be sitting on the street with a little shoebox, a little packet, a little cookie tin of stones, and a little astrological calculator, and doing people's charts for 100 rupees and giving them their stone and their chart. This is really what people think in India. It's become so low class, astrological jewelry, that they picture a guy sitting on the street corner with a shoe shine box selling stones in a Sucrets tin and doing the chart on the spot for 100 rupees. This is the image they have, And so I was thinking, I've got to uplift this image, because this is actually an exalted science. That's the most exalted manifestation of gemmology in the world.
When did when you were reading these books, because of your knowledge of Sanskrit and you were finding these, could you just name a few of those texts which are about gems?
No, there was one called the one. Well, first I had the Garuda Puran, which has 14 chapters on gems. Then I got a hold of a book called the Graha Gochar Jyotish. And then I had another book called Ratna Pariksha. And then another book that was written by the same author of Ratna Pariksha, and it was in English, called Indian Gemmology. And another book called Gem Therapy by A.K. Bhattacharya, who I became friends with, and another book by Rajrup Tank in Jaipur. And they all talked about the planetary aspects of gems.
So which part in your story was it where were you when you started that in-depth study?
No, when I first went to join Sham Sundar,
right at that
and getting into gems, right at that point I went to bookstores. Gems. Ruby, sun, pearl, moon. I'm like, wow, really? And it was like I couldn't believe that this was so easy to understand and so clear, and there was just nobody talking about it in the West.
Right.
And in India, the people who were actually paying attention to that were just poor people,
So,
and that were just getting junk stones. And so, how are you going to get good health from a glass of dirty water?
So we're going to get more and more into the details as we go into this part of your chapter, because this is so. Excuse me. So
I went back to Nepal with these 5 kilos of rupees. And I left some of them with Devananda, and I gave some to Devananda, and he was supposed to go to India to sell these to the same guy that I had sold some to before in Bombay. When I'd been to Bombay and sold those 5 kilos. That guy wanted to buy more. So I asked Devananda to take these 5 kilos and go there and sell them to the guy and come back with the money. And I'm going to go to Thailand. Now, I had met this girl when I was once I got involved with girls, okay, I'm not a sannyasi anymore, but I was still didn't have any idea how to dress any other way, because I hadn't worn pants or anything like that in 6 years, That's a long time to not even have, I didn't wear any stitch, because when you're in the Gaudiya Math, they have all these rules about sannyas, like you can't wear any stitched clothing, you couldn't wear a kurta or anything like that, and nobody was wearing shoes, So I was still dressed like that. So anyway, I met this girl named Marlene, a British girl. And she was telling me, oh, you should go to Bali and make these talismans you're talking about. And this place has got the fantastic goldsmiths, and it's a beautiful place. So she went with me to Thailand, and I got the cutting started and got some stones cut and got some others, regular stones too, good stones, with money I had. And then we went to Bali with her. And I met a couple of goldsmiths in Bali, and Bali was deserted then. The whole Ligyan beach was just a great big nothing. It was just a jungle. There was Kuta Beach, and that was it. And then there was on the other side of the island, there was that Sanur Beach, and that was it in Bali. There was no anything. There was a very few seen, and there was a couple of golds. So I started making these talismans, because in the meantime I had also gotten herbs made by the president of the Royal Nepal Ayurveda Association, Dr. Manavajracharya. That's when I understood how to make these talismans. You get the herbs, make them into basmas, put the basmas together with the symbol, together with the number, and the metal, with the gem, and you got to punch them.
Can you just explain it? So punch. What is a basma? Just maybe explain, because this is now what we're talking about. It's a kind of alchemy, isn't it? It's a form of alchemy.
Yeah.
So which is quite highbrow esoteric science, even in Western science.
And I had actually understood. I saw that there are 5 elements in nature: earth, water, fire, air, ether. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, and each one of these has their corresponding element in nature. Like in relation to earth, it's the gemstone. In relation to the earth, water is the herb, fire is the metal, And so I was thinking how to put this together. And when I went back to Nepal, I met up with the magician, Merlin the magician, who's Ira Cohen, who was my friend at that point. And he was with Petra, and he was always dressed in all black with a skull. And he was like something out of a Crowley nightmare, But he had this big book called The Secret Teachings of All Ages. And so I was talking to him about these things I'm learning.
By P. Manley Hall.
Right. So he opened this book up and he showed me these two quotes, which I still use today. One was by Agrippa, one was by, who was it? Paracelsus or something. And so they had, one guy had said, the rays of the celestial bodies, when they strike the crystallizing influences of the lower world, become the various elements.
Okay.
And they retain the essence of those planetary influences. And so, and the other one said, you take when a planet ascends fortunately, which I take to mean auspiciously, when a planet is auspicious for somebody, you take the gem of that planet and you combine it with the herb of that planet together with the metal of that planet and put the symbol and the numbers all together and then use the proper suffumigations, which is the installation or the puja, to install the ring. And so I thought, wow, this is how you do it. And then I started coming up with an idea of how you get the little tubes in the ring. You have little tiny tubes with the seal with the herb. And I went to the chairman of the Nepal Ayurveda Association, who I'd become friends with, and he made the herbs for me. He actually got the herbs. He told me what the herbs were, gave me examples of them, which I use to this day. And he made the basmas for me, 9 kinds of basmas. And then I took some of that, went to Thailand, and got more stones, went to Bali, and I started making these talismans with the little herbs, the little tube like this.
Yeah.
You see the little tube, which have herbs inside and the gem on the outside. And I was using clean stones, except for those rubies, those Hyderabad rubies. I was using clean stones.
Okay.
Because those Hyderabad rubies couldn't be clean.
Right.
Because they were translucent. They weren't transparent. They were translucent.
Oh. Okay.
Like for instance, a piece of jade is not transparent; it's translucent. You can't see into it. But light can shine through it, but you can't see into it.
Right.
So there's no question of being flawless because it's just basically cryptocrystalline. It's not a single unit crystal. So I started making these talismans, and people right there in Bali were buying these from me as I made them. I mean, tourists and stuff were buying these from me, and so then I thought, this works. Here I am doing this astrological jewelry, and I wrote a letter to Prabhupada too, and told him about what I had discovered about this. I sent you a copy of my reply because I got it. This is by '77. I had written to Prabhupada telling him about this astrological jewelry and asking if it was valid.
So is this where we are at now in the story in the Bali? Well, you're doing.
No. Sorry, I jumped ahead. So anyway, I went back to Bangkok after Bali and got some more stones, and then went back to Nepal, and that's when we started this project to build that school, And then from Nepal, I went back to Bangkok and back to Bali. And so I come back to Bali, come back to Nepal, and David Under comes back from India, and he lost the rubies. He doesn't have any money. He doesn't even know what happened. He was losing his mind. Right. He was literally losing. And 1 kilo of rubies I had left with him. He said he left it under. He was in a hotel in Kathmandu, and he put it under the mattress. And when he checked out, he forgot it. And when he came back, he couldn't find it. And so he had basically lost 5 kilos of rubies, David Under. And so he was a complete space cadet. And I kept telling him, I said, you have got no worries in this world. You're not a fugitive. Nobody's after you. You don't have your freedom at stake. I'm the guy that has to keep a low profile, and you're a lunatic, you're the one with no worries, and you're acting like a lunatic. And I'm trying to keep a low profile here. And so he lost all these rubies. And plus, so I'm like, man, what do I do with this guy? So anyway, he got involved with the girl also, David Under did. And he wanted to take her down. So I ended up taking David Under, went to Bali, and he took that girl with him. And we did that twice, went down there twice. So I ended up going to Bali 4 times and staying 3 months each time. And 2 of the times I went there with David Under and that girl, And I was just focusing on making the jewelry, and he was just being a space cadet. And the girl that he was involved with was also not like she was spiritual minded. No, she wasn't like, they weren't having sex or anything, It was like David Under was like a real space cadet, He wasn't like a sensual minded person. He was really, a really cold fish, David Under, which this girl liked that, and I liked it too because I'd rather that he's like that. And so I'd rather that girl not even be there.
So how?
Because I had to.
So somehow or other, in this story, while the jury's going on, you're going to go back to America, aren't you? Because you're going to join. So how does that story? And you said that. And did you have any communication?
No, I didn't go back to America until the end of until 79 years later.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So this okay. So 74, you kind of this starting this whole gem thing. So does that go on for 3 years, backwards and forwards, Nepal, Thailand, all on that dodgy passport? You all on that,
Bali, four
all
times
that
to
dodgy
Bali,
passport.
six times to Thailand. Yeah, yeah.
Father man.
Well, at some point, I think when I was back in Nepal, at some point around 75 or something, I noticed that the passport I had was expiring. The passport
Right.
was somebody else's picture, so I was going to have to go into the American embassy in Kathmandu and deal with real Westerners with a picture with somebody else's picture, a passport with somebody else's picture, and get it renewed. Which I did. I did Narayan Kavacha. Whenever I was going to be in a dangerous situation, I would do Narayan Kavacha, all properly and Paka and read all this, the whole thing. And then I'd be basically protected. So when I went into the embassy in Kathmandu with that paper, I had to talk to this American lady, and she sent me in to see the head guy, American guy. And I remember seeing the picture above his head of Nixon, who I didn't even know who that was. I didn't know who was anything. I didn't have any news. I didn't know who was the president. I didn't know anything. So I remember picturing a discus, a chakra above his head. And he's asking me questions like, "What's your birth? Why are you in this country? What's your plan? And what's your birth date?" I mean, stuff like that to try to catch me off balance. Where were you born? And so I was like, picturing this chakra above his head and. Between him and Nixon, and just thinking, okay, this is
Chakra meaning a cosmic spinning wheel of Vishnu.
Yeah.
And also it's like you use the phrase, I was doing the Narayan Kavacha. For most people who have no idea, but basically what you're invoking through mantras, a protective talisman of mantras that's from the Bhagavat, the god Indra evoked when he went to fight Vitrasura. So it's an ancient ritual, but it's a Vaishnav ritual, and you've kind of, to help yourself and protect you, you've done the Narayan Kavacha, and then you're in the embassy and you're saying, so it's, because you're going through, these are, for most people, they're thinking, they're going to imagine, how is that possible? And the only reason it seems to be it's possible is divine intervention. You've got this kind of, you're invoking it, and you're taking shelter of the power of these principles that you've learned in your training. You understand the power of these things. So it's interesting how you're going through this journey, and still you're evoking these powerful Vedic and through.
Well, like a situation like going to the embassy, it's not like I could go there and maybe I'll have a little bit of a hassle. It's like I could go there and get arrested.
Absolutely.
And sent back to hell, which is America, and put together with a bunch of hellish demons, which are Americans, and not have any facilities to eat vegetarian food even, And I would, at that point, it's not even a question of going to the army.
Were you dressed? Were you dressed as what were you dressed like when you went to the embassy that time? Did you have proper clothes or normal? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was just in a doji, I think.
Okay. But so you weren't dressed like an American tourist or something. You're still in your.
No.
So you went to the. Okay. So then after, what happened at the conclusion while the chakra is spinning above his head?
He said, "Okay, we'll come back in the afternoon." So I was thinking I'm going to get arrested when I come back in the afternoon, But I still had the Narayan Kavacha, and I didn't need anything. And so when I went back in the afternoon, they gave me a new passport with my picture.
Wow, that is magical.
And I'm like, well, Narayan Kavacha works,
Jai Hari.
And so all of a sudden, wow, I've not only got a new passport, but I got my own picture finally.
That's incredible. I think that's incredible. Matura's Nandana.